So, hi, everybody. I'm Nan Travers. And I just want to start off by saying that I live, work, play, and make art on the ancestral homeland of the Abenaki Nation in an area that the colonists named the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont in the US. I'm going to just jump right in with my slides just to keep it going. And, you know, one of the things that I've been so impressed with what everybody else has been presenting today is to really be thinking about the individual, the learner, and understanding what they know and can do. And so when we talk about thinking about the kinds of data that we collect, we have to also be thinking about these stories. And so individuals, as we go through experiences, we develop our lived experience language, and out of that, we share it through narratives, through stories. And when we start looking at what we're asking in the academic world and also the in the workplace, where we start to try to have everybody fit those narratives into that formal assessment. But over and over again, you know, we are definitely recognizing that we miss an enormous amount of what people know and can do by doing that. So my advance here didn't quite work. There we go. My career has really looked a lot at how we learn, and then thinking about how do we assess based on how we learn. So I dived quite a bit into cognitive science to kind of get a sense of what's happening with the brain. I'm just going to take a second here where we talk about having prior learning and the new learning, the emergent learning combined together. They're never separated because we build new learning on top of what we already know, and so it's converged. And what's happening is the brain creates relationships through neural networking, and so it's all about relational learning and in preparation for future learning. And out of that, we also have developed systems where the first thing we go through when we're encountering a new learning experience is to do a self-assessment. How does this fit what I already know? What do I not know here? And then figuring out what do I need to know next, that inquiry mode, in order to prepare for that future, to transfer it to new things. So if we think about this as the way that people are developing knowledge and we go to assess that learning, we need to be thinking about, you know, what are the data that we are really collecting? And so through this, the knowledge structures are actually creating a few ways of looking at this in the way that it kind of forms. Then we get connected learning, embedded learning, integrated learning, and shared learning. And the shared learning is also from a community perspective, not only that we can share learning, but together we're learning, the learning is grown in the way that we're looking at that. And yet when we start to really think about that, you know, as we've, and I want to thank Susan for this slide, and I have a couple other slides in here that she created on another presentation we did together. But when we start to think about the approaches, when we think about Western knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, all different ways of knowing, that we have such diversity in the ways in which we construct our knowledge. And so we need to be thinking about when we go to collect data, and thinking about the data about what somebody knows and can do, but then also how we think about the data to talk about progress, to talk about persistence, to talk about the different kinds of institutional or workplace data that we want. We can't ignore all these diverse ways of constructing knowledge and knowing knowledge. Also, we have AI that has entered our world. And one of the things that has really been striking me is that as we use AI in different ways and as different roles, and you know, some are using it as an assistant, some as an advisor, some as a partner where you're actually co-developing, and so we now are entering a different part, sort of a new construction in the way that we can even talk about knowledge, because we can't be without the AI world has entered in such a way that it's a different type of community knowledge that is now part of the system. And so we have to be thinking about that as well. And then when we start to think about how we put this all together in a valuing process, we need to think about, the individual's knowledge structures, but then we enter that into different valuing lenses, the field's perspective, the organization's perspective, division within that. If we're in a higher education, like a department, the types of assessments that we use, and then those outcomes. And so that valuing lens has minimized what we're actually collecting and looking at in terms of the knowledge structures for individuals and communities. So we really need to be thinking about what are those valuing lenses that we're putting upon these knowledge structures, and how are we able to really honor and recognize them versus constraining it and trying to fit it into a system that's already pre-designed and doesn't have that knowledge growth that's part of it. And so when we start to think about the data needs that we have, there are these different audiences and the kinds of questions that they're asking. We have to, we start to think about, well, if you're looking at job performance, that's going to be one type of data. Or if we're looking at an employee's career growth, that's going to be another type of data. And so as we start to put that all together, we have to start to really, I think, critically analyze what we are doing with the data. So in this slide, I talk about really how we've kind of built systems on huge data reduction. And if we go to the very bottom here, where we talk about essays and using resumes for people and being able to say, oh, well, somebody has this knowledge because on the resume, this is what it says. And we can interpret that resume and say, okay, you know something because you've put it on your resume. But that resume is a data reduction and a very simplified way of being able to say what somebody knows and can do. And on the kind of the job curricular side of things, we tend to go with curricular simplifications. I know some programs out there will literally use job postings where they've extracted the information from the web in terms of what people need to know and to do for a job, and then they use resumes and they match them up. But we're using the most reduced amount of information. But if we go back to the original sources, the direct sources, we really have the individual, their stories we can gather through interviews. We have some real information about the way that somebody constructs the world around them and how they see their knowledge fitting together and how they transfer that knowledge to new situations. And on the same way that if we start to look at job requirements, if we really look at from the people who are doing the job, the kinds of requirements that are really required, then we get a better sense of what are those the occupation competencies. And the same way, thinking about curriculum and training, when we really get to the conversations with the people who are designing and teaching the curriculum, we get much closer to what really is to be known and what is being looked at. And so as we look at this, because it's harder to collect and it takes more work to interpret the direct sources of knowledge and the direct sources of the kinds of requirements that we want, we have really as a society accepted this data reduction to the point where it doesn't really represent what somebody knows and can do or what we need somebody to know and to be able to do. And so as we start to think about that, traditional assessments or traditional data processes tends to stay on that traditional regression analysis. It's around structured data. It only has linear dimensions. So if we start to talk about, let's just say, we're looking at our program and we want to know persistence and completion, and then next steps for people. We tend to use data that's easy to get hold of, but also will fit more into that linear dimension. We have so many people participate. We have so many people who completed. We have so many people who got a job or continued their education. And we tend to, and for, decades have stayed in that linear dimension. What has really changed for us is this deep learning analysis that has the ability to take the stories and that linear data and bring them together. We can combine structured and unstructured data. We've never had that ability before. We all know that the story of somebody persisting or not includes things like what's happening in their family, whether they're working, whether they have severe bills to pay, whether there's health issues. All of these pieces that we know working with learners are important, but we can't put that in the data. And so we've been, we're really making assumptions based again on that data reduction without the real story in there. Now with the deep learning analyses that have come out, there are tools out there that can really help people. We can start to add the story in there as well as these data points that we want to collect. And so we're, for the first time in our history, when it comes to data analytics, we all of a sudden have an expansion of what we can do, and we don't have to ignore the story. These new processes can take quantitative and qualitative and bring them together and give a very different picture than what we've had. And so when we really think about where we need to go, we need data that is multifaceted, it's accessible, being able to really think about how it all fits together. When we think about the learner, the kinds of information and the needs that they have around data, the employer, the post-secondary institutions, we each have our own needs for the data, and we can each meet our needs from the data when we combine the data like that. We need data that is very multifaceted. So when we just saw those incredible videos, and then also in the last presentation, and then also in Susan's and Tiffany's presentation that we saw on the break, there were stories in there that are not getting captured in the overall data structures. And so that's why I'm saying we really have to shift the story on data, and we really have to be thinking about how to bring the lived experiences, the lived stories, and have that as part of what we're looking at. And so that is the end. I really was trying to keep that fast so that we can stay on schedule, but I think I have a few minutes where we can take some comments or questions.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this, I first saw a version of this 2 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's definitely come along, and I think technology is part of the story, right? The changing technology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, because one of the things that I think where we're getting, technology to capture the learning is very different. Some people here know that I am in the middle of designing an assessment tool that will be augmented with AI, but keeping the learner in the center, but also taking the voice of the learner, the voice of the community, and the voice of the credentialing and frameworks and such, and laying them together as equals. So the technology allows that in a way that we couldn't before. But the other piece is we're all grappling with the AI evolution. And, the question that comes up now is, how do we know if this is the learner's information or or is it, if they used AI, these kinds of things. So we have to be thinking about better ways of asking learners questions to get at their stories and understand also that AI is another community of knowledge. And so, we need to be thinking about the humanity around all of this and how that fits in and how that can be part of the data.
I have another question, but maybe somebody else has one.
Okay. Sorry, my cat
Well,
that my lap was just where she needed to be while I presented.
Okay. So the story of the person, what I would call the candidate in this process, say the person wants recognition for a purpose, and finding the story. Now, the trouble is, me as a consumer, am I interested in that story? Is there a way of telling me the stories that I need to hear that are authentic, but are also highly relevant to me? Is there a way of sort of setting that up, the 180 degree on that?
Well, so this is where I think we have to start asking ourselves, what is it that we really want to know? What do we really need? And why I think it's important that we put a freeze in some ways on the kinds of data that we've been collecting and really rethink what is it that we need to know. And then, you as a, if you want to know something from data from other people, you want to know more about their story, that we have mechanisms to be able to connect those pieces. And, just having drilled down data points is not going to tell you anything. For example, in the United States, a data point, 1 out of 6 adults have some college and no experience and no credential, excuse me. But what does that tell you? What does it tell you about the how they've been failed in the system? It doesn't tell you anything about how many of them had to go to work, how many, were advised into the wrong program. It's just like, oh my gosh, we've got so many adults that, started college and are left with debt. So we really have to get a better sense of what it is we need to know and how we need to know it, and then redesign the ways in which we collect it. We've got tools now to collect data and analyze them in a way we never did before. So my pitch is, let's start fresh. What do we need to know? And let's build those systems for ourselves.
I guess my follow-up question is, can we mass customize that? What is it we need to know? What is it I need to know versus this person needs to know versus this person needs to know?
And I do think that we've got the potential to allow queries into data on an individual basis or in a batch basis. So again, the tools might not be there yet, but we can start designing the tools to get at what we want.
Okay, so Keiko has a question.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Regarding the first few slides that you mentioned about the colonial epistemologies, the current way of capturing learning is very much individuals, based on the individuals. And you mentioned about the community based of like the process of AI, the whole AI revolution is. I wonder if there is a future direction or your thinking regarding the direction of recognition outside of individuals.
So I feel that we have to look at the individual, the community, and then the pressure of the industry and higher education all together as a leveling playing field. Because right now, we say this is what you have to have, and then we compare the individual to that. We ignore the community completely. And so there, it's really a three-pronged, the three-legged stool kind of idea. And I think it's important to be able to capture what the community knows as a part of that knowledge structure for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to go back to Serge's presentation earlier today in terms of thinking about how do we create systems that support transformation. And so if the if the community doesn't have the ability to learn from the individual, then it can't evolve. The individual learns from the community. We kind of take it like it's a one-way street, but in many ways it's a multi-way street where everybody's learning from each other. And if if industry and higher education cannot learn from the community and can't learn from the individual, it will stay as rigid as it always has been. So I really think we have to think of it as a whole system together, and thinking about how we can collect information and also share information back that actually allows for knowledge growth around all of this.
Great. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut the questions there. It seemed like we had so much time, and then it all went away. So yeah. I have to, that obviously means a great session. So